They say music doesn't need translation. But no one expected this. On a freezing December night in Russia, inside a centuries-old cathedral built for hymns and Church Slavonic, something happened that made priests stop singing, tourists lower their phones, and grown men quietly wipe their eyes. The song wasn't Russian. It wasn't Orthodox. Most people in the room didn't even understand the words. It was a Filipino Christmas song, and by the time the final note faded into the stone walls, an entire cathedral had fallen into tears. This is the story of how a song born under tropical skies, sung by a people who celebrate Christmas longer than anyone else on earth, crossed continents, crossed cultures, and somehow reached a place no one thought it ever could. To understand why that moment mattered, you have to start far away from Russia, far away from snow, far away from cathedrals. You have to start in the Philippines. In the Philippines, Christmas doesn't begin in December. It begins in September. When the bear months arrive, September, October, November, the country slowly changes its heartbeat. Radio stations start playing familiar melodies. Jeepneys hang tiny paroles, those star-shaped lanterns glowing with soft light. Malls echo with songs people have heard since childhood. Even the air feels different, heavier with memory. Filipino Christmas songs are not loud declarations. They're not grand anthems. They're quiet, tender, often bittersweet. They talk about waiting, about distance, about love that stretches across time and oceans, about family members who won't make it home this year but are still felt in every verse. And one song, more than any other, carries that feeling in its bones. Pasko na naman. It's Christmas again. On paper, the lyrics are simple, almost ordinary. But Filipinos know the truth. This song doesn't just announce Christmas. It remembers every Christmas that came before it. It remembers being a child, counting nights until dawn mass. It remembers empty chairs at the table. It remembers letters from overseas workers promising they'll be home next year. For millions of Filipinos living abroad, this song isn't festive. It's personal. And that's how it found its way to Russia. In Moscow, St. Petersburg, Vladivostok, and dozens of smaller cities, there is a Filipino community most people never notice. Nurses, caregivers, choir singers, embassy staff, students, people who came for work, for opportunity, or simply because life carried them there. Winter in Russia is not gentle. For Filipinos, it can feel endless. The days shorten. The sun disappears early. The cold seeps into bones that grew up under the sun. And Christmas, the season that feels most alive back home, can feel painfully distant. So Filipinos do what they always do. They sing. In 2018, a small Filipino choir was invited to participate in an interfaith Christmas concert held inside a historic Russian Orthodox cathedral. These concerts were usually formal, predictable, beautiful but restrained. The organizers expected a short, respectful performance, something foreign but polite. The choir debated what to sing. They could have chosen something impressive, something complex, but instead they chose that song, Pasko na naman. They didn't translate the lyrics. They didn't explain the meaning. They simply stood under the cathedral's vast dome, surrounded by icons painted hundreds of years earlier, and began to sing. At first, the audience listened politely. Russian hymns are powerful, but they are structured, commanding, built to fill space. This song was different. It didn't rise like a declaration. It moved like a memory. The melody was gentle, almost fragile, but it carried something deeper. The harmonies were warm, human, not perfect, not mechanical. And then something strange happened. People started leaning forward. A Russian nun later said she didn't understand why her chest felt heavy. She had no idea what the words meant, but the melody felt familiar, like a childhood she couldn't quite remember. A man in the back row whispered to his wife that the song felt like waiting for someone who never arrives, but loving them anyway. As the second verse began, the cathedral grew unnaturally quiet. No coughs, no shuffling, just listening. The Filipino singers weren't trying to impress anyone. Some of them were thinking about their own families thousands of miles away, mothers, children, parents growing older without them, and that feeling traveled. Musicologists often talk about how minor keys can evoke sadness, but this wasn't just sadness, it was longing. The kind of longing that exists in every culture, every language. When the choir reached the final refrain, Pasko na naman, Anguni teo'i wala na. Christmas is here again, but we are no longer the same. Something broke. A priest lowered his head. A woman crossed herself and quietly cried. One audience member later said, "It felt like the song was singing for us, not to us." By the final note, the silence lasted longer than the song itself. No applause at first. Just people breathing, processing. Then, slowly, the entire cathedral rose to its feet. Not because they understood Filipino, but because they understood missing someone. Because they understood time passing. Because they understood love that survives distance. Videos of the performance were uploaded online, quietly at first, then shared, then reshared. Comments poured in from all over the world. A Russian viewer wrote, "I don't know the language, but I cried like it was my own Christmas." A Filipino nurse in Siberia commented, "This song is my home." Someone from Brazil said, "I've never heard this before, but it hurts in a beautiful way." The cathedral moment went viral not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. In a world full of loud performances, this was something else. It was a reminder that Christmas, at its core, is not about decorations or traditions. It's about waiting, about hope, about love that endures cold seasons. For Filipinos, Christmas songs carry centuries of history, Spanish influences, indigenous melodies, American harmonies. But above all, they carry emotion. That night in Russia, a song shaped by tropical rain, long nights of caroling, and family gatherings under tin roofs met a place shaped by snow, stone, and incense. And instead of clashing, they recognized each other. One of the choir members later said something simple. "We weren't singing for them. We were singing for ourselves. They just happened to hear it. That may be why it worked. Because authenticity travels farther than language." Every year since, Filipino communities in cold countries replay that video as Christmas approaches. Not to go viral again, but to remember that even in the coldest places, warmth can exist. That a song can cross borders without a passport. That a cathedral built for one tradition can hold another without breaking. And that sometimes the most powerful performances are the ones that don't try to be powerful at all. They just tell the truth. So the next time you hear a Christmas song in a language you don't understand, don't rush past it. Listen to what it feels like. Because somewhere, someone far from home might be singing the same song for the same reasons. And you might understand more than you think.